Next up, we're going to learn a little bit about the relationship between our Indriyas, or sense organs, and our thoughts. So the interesting thing is that according to the yogic path of pratyahara, thoughts in the mind originate in the sense organs. And so what we're going to do now is use meditation as a tool to understand that relationship. So for this next meditation, what you're going to need is some kind of food that you really enjoy. And it's important to pick something that you like, because the more that you like the food, the more powerful the engagement of your mind will be. And so this may sound kind of simple, but what I really, really want y'all to do, I cannot stress this enough, please do not just watch the video and do this after. I want y'all to do it with me, with the food right in front of you. Otherwise, the effect will just be drastically different. And I know it sounds like kind of simple, like, oh, like I can just watch this and I can go and then like do the food and I can kind of do it on my own. But trust me, this is going to be a little bit stranger than maybe you give it credit for. So go grab some kind of food that you really like, and then we'll go ahead and begin the practice. So hopefully by now you've got your food, and if you don't, pause the video and go grab it. But what I want you to do is start by setting the food in front of you. And what we're going to do is just kind of focus on the food for a moment and notice what comes up. As you look at the food, what kind of thoughts or feelings kind of come up? Do you have a certain desire about eating the food? Do you think a little bit about what it's going to taste like? Whatever sort of thoughts that come up, hopefully you've practiced thought awareness meditation, so you're just kind of aware of the thoughts. And there may be particular kinds of desires that come up. Maybe you want to eat it, maybe you can't wait to eat it. You'll also notice that the effect of the Indriyas on your body is not just in your mind, that you may be salivating a little bit or your stomach is growling a little bit. So there may be other kinds of effects that you feel. And now what you may be thinking is, the natural next step is to mindfully eat. And what we're going to do is take a bite of the food. But actually, we're not going to do that. In fact, we're not going to eat this at all. We're actually going to throw this piece of food away. And notice what happens in your mind as I tell you to do that. If I tell you, okay, this is something that we're going to throw away, what happens in your head? Suddenly, you have some kinds of thoughts starting to form. No, but that'll be a waste, right? Oh, like that's such a waste of food, and like wasting food is bad, and so we shouldn't waste food, and we should eat this thing, because wasting food is bad. There are starving children in developing countries, and so throwing this piece of food away will make them feel fuller. It's not really how it works, right? Like that's not how it works. I mean, they're not going to be able to eat this piece of food. And so notice that as I tell you that we're not going to eat it, what does your mind do? Because your Indriyas want it. They may notice its color, they may imagine its flavor. And as I sort of tell you we're not going to eat this, your mind will start to rebel a little bit. Or maybe you're extra tricky. And you're kind of thinking, my mind is supposed to rebel. That's what Dr. K is tricking me into, but I'm not going to rebel. If Dr. K tells me not to eat the food, I'm going to listen to it. I'm not going to fall for his trap. And if I need to discard the food, I will discard the food, because I am a meditator and I am strong and I will overcome it. Fantastic, good job. So just notice your relationship. Notice what's happening in your mind as we start to restrict or alter the food that you're allowed to eat. And the next thing that I want you to consider is, even if you can sort of master that, so there's a couple different things that can happen, right? One is that, okay, if we're deciding that we're not going to eat this food, you can actually restrain your impulses. You don't have to eat it. You can discard it or give it away or something like that, right? Because there are lots of different things you can do besides potentially throwing it away. We're just saying that you're not allowed to eat it. And maybe what your mind is doing is rebelling against that. But even with all the good arguments that it comes up with for, rebelling against what I'm telling you to do, what's the end goal there? If you sort of argue against me and you convince yourself that you're allowed to eat the food, what do you get to do? You get to give in to your desires. You get to satisfy your Indriyas. So notice what your mind is doing. It's doing whatever it can to satisfy the Indriyas, and it'll come up with whatever justification it can find. And it'll come up with really good ones. Or as I mentioned before, maybe you're stronger than that. Maybe you're cleverer than that. Maybe you've seen that piece coming, and you're not going to give in to your Indriyas, which is totally fine. So in that case, don't eat the food the next time, or the next time, or the next time. And for the remainder of your life, if you are in control of your Indriyas, never eat that food again. Now what happens? What happens in your mind if I tell you to do that? All kinds of different things. One is like, hey, like this is a scam. I didn't sign up for this. I didn't agree to this. What do you mean don't eat it next time? Like, I'm not going to be tricked into this. I get to eat the food whenever I want to. Like, who's this guy, like random dude on the internet in a video telling me not to eat this food? What, I can never eat, chocolate-covered strawberries again for the rest of my life? Does he mean the chocolate, or does he mean the strawberries, or does he mean both? Like, that's ridiculous. Like, what's going on here? Like, I'm not going to do that. Or maybe you're saying, yes, I will. Yes, I will take control of my Indriyas. I'm strong. I'm a meditator. And if I've been tricked into giving up this particular food, that's okay. So just notice what's happening in your mind as we start to deny a particular thing to your Indriyas. All kinds of stuff will happen. They'll be like, no, we're not going to, like, it's ridiculous. Like, we're not going to do that. Or maybe what you're telling yourself is, oh, yeah, we are going to do that. But deep down, you know that you're not going to do it. Or maybe your mind is telling you, I'm not going to get tricked by this noob. Like, screw this. I'm going to eat whatever I want to. And who wins in that situation? Your Indriyas win, right? They get to eat the food. They won't be denied. And the other interesting thing that we can sort of learn about the mind, and this is really important to understand, is that if I tell you not to eat this particular thing, you can do that, right? Like, you can not eat this particular food that you've picked. But when I add time as a dimension, what changes in your mind? Suddenly, time as a dimension makes things way, way harder. Once I incorporate the future, if I say, okay, you're not allowed to eat it this time and the next time, and then your Indriyas are sneaky, right? They're like, okay, so next time is going to be 5 seconds from now. So I'm going to take a second one, I'm going to put it right there, and then I'll be done. And then I can eat it afterward. So whatever happens, your mind is always going to satisfying the Indriyas. And if I add 2 next times, if I say the next 3 times you're not allowed to eat the food, then your mind can still manage it. Okay, I can manage 3 times. But the more time that I add, you're not allowed to eat it for a month, you're not allowed to eat it for a year, you're not allowed to eat it for a decade. What happens in your mind? Your mind rebels more and more and more and more and more. And it's kind of interesting because at the end of the day, anytime you resist eating your food, the effort is exactly what you're putting in right in this moment. Anyone can resist eating a single piece of food for once in their life. Like, anybody can do that, right? But it's sort of this idea of adding time as a dimension that suddenly makes things harder. But each of those opportunities for you to eat the food is actually going to be exactly the same as this one. It's just one moment in time that you have to avoid eating one piece of food. So this is another really important thing to understand, that we lose to our desires the more that time enters into the dimension of kind of control in the Indriyas. And so at this point, you may be kind of wondering, okay, like, so I'm still a little bit confused. Am I allowed to eat this, or am I not allowed to eat this? Is this like a trick, or is this like what's going on? Like, is this just like, am I just doing this for illustration purposes? And at the end of it, I can kind of eat whatever I want to? Because if your mind is thinking that now, like, let's think about that. What is that actually satisfying? What is that giving into? It's giving into the Indriyas, because now that you've learned the lesson, you can eat the food, right? Like, clearly, like, I get the principle. I get what you're saying. So I can eat it now, right? Well, that all kind of leave up to you. So you decide for yourself, are you ever going to eat this thing again or not? And you may say, well, yeah, I learned the lesson, so now I'm allowed to eat it. Like, that's up to you. You decide. Who's in control? You or the Indriyas? Well, no, you can't debate me into giving up one of my favorite foods for the rest of my life. Like, that's not fair. Okay, I never said it was going to be fair. You decide who's in control, you or your Indriyas. Can you resist something for some amount of time or not? How long can you resist it? The key thing about this practice is notice what the relationship is between literally something that is an object that you can see or taste or smell, and how much it controls your mind. How your mind twists and turns and does all of these mental gymnastics at the end of the day, trying to get you to be okay eating the food. No, this is ridiculous. Of course I can eat it. Of course I can eat it. I'm not going to be tricked by this. This person's taking advantage of me. This person's an asshole. He's not even being nice. And so the more that your mind justifies being able to eat the food, like just notice what's happening as all these thoughts arise. And at the end of the day, all of those thoughts are pointed in one direction. And that is the satisfaction of your Indriyas. So the purpose of this exercise is just to understand this relationship. And if you're still kind of struggling to understand, okay, is he going to tell me to eat it or not eat it, then you decide, right? Like, who am I to tell you what you should do? If you want to master your Indriyas, then don't eat the food. And this is the kind of thing where at the end of the day, you have to decide like what's right for you. So you can eat it now, or you can eat it later, or you can never eat it again. That's up to you. The main thing, though, is maintain awareness of the relationship between what you see, what you smell, what you taste, what you touch, what you hear, and your mind. And by the way, for those of you that are wondering, I have actually done this, right? So this is not something that I would ask you to do unless I had done it myself. And for a period of about 10 years, I arbitrarily gave up one of my favorite foods and didn't touch it. And you'll be amazed at what actually happens. Because really think about it, like what are we talking about here? Are you not going to be happy for the rest of your life if you give up this food? Like, what is that? Like, does that mean you're going to be filled with despair? Like, of course not. Are you not going to have pride and joy and love and accomplishment? Of course not. That's ridiculous. When we think about all of the things that are really amazing in our life, they have nothing to do with the food in front of you. It's just a piece of food. And so this is the kind of thing where you're like, oh, no, I don't want to let it go for 10 years. 10 years is such a long time. Does that mean I have to give it up for 10 years and then I can eat it on year 11? Like, really, what do you think is going to change about your life if you never ate that food again? Like, how is your life going to change? Chances are it's not very much. But that's not what the Indriyas want you to believe. So you decide for yourself what is right. But once again, as I mentioned, I wouldn't ask you to do anything that I myself haven't done.